Who is Jesus Christ? Latter-day Saints claim to be Christians often because they are followers of Christ. But the question is, do they follow the Christ of the Bible? Today I thought it'd be a good idea to walk through one of the most well-known texts in the Bible that give us insight into the person of Christ. I'm going to be studying through John 1, verses 1 through 3, just to give a little insight into how we think about these verses and why these verses are incompatible with the teachings of the LDS Church. But let's jump in. First, let's read verses 1 through 3. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. First thing we note, we have some repetition here. If we look at the beginning here, we have in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. We have three statements about the Word. Statement 1, he was in the beginning. Statement 2, he was with God. Statement 3, he was God. This is just in verse 1. Notice also we have two statements about God. We also have a verb here, was, and was. So let's look at what this is actually saying. To start off, we have in the beginning was the Word. Now, in the beginning is a preposition. And what a preposition does is it kind of modifies the nature of a verb. It's functioning as an adverb or sometimes a noun, in which case it's functioning like an adjective. In this case, it's telling us something about the verb was. So the Word existed. And the Word existed when? Well, in the beginning. If you're familiar much with the Bible, you'll notice that this phrase echoes Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, which says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So we have this kind of echo back to the beginning of Genesis, and we see that the Word was there in the beginning. It's also worth just a quick note that in Greek, the language that this was written in, this verb was has the idea of viewing the action in progress, meaning John is not talking about the Word at a particular point in eternity past, but kind of the fact that the Word has existed as far back as you go. The Word is eternal. In the beginning, before the foundation of the earth, the Word existed and continued to exist. That's really interesting to study sometime, but that's kind of outside the frame for this video. So anyways, we have a statement about the Word existing in the beginning. That's the first claim. The second claim is that the Word was with God, with God. Now this word with indicates here proximity. Proximity. The Word was in proximity with God, next to, near, alongside. The Word didn't just exist in a vacuum. The Word was with God. Now, that makes sense, but we see something a little bit unique here, and John will develop this through the Gospel of John. The Word is actually the only one who was with God in the beginning. The Gospel of John will go on to teach that we are not from above, we are not from heaven, we did not pre-exist. The only one who pre-existed was the Word, was this Word. So we get the little beginnings of that right here. And then we get the third statement, which is perhaps the most interesting. It says, and the Word was God, was God. Now, what exactly is this saying? The Word was with God and the Word was God. Well, that's very interesting. This is kind of a paradox, or two statements that are both true alongside one another. The Word was God would be a very controversial statement for Jews to read. I mean, Jews have the Old Testament. And the Old Testament teaches that there only ever has been and only ever will be one Creator God who is eternal and unchanging. So how can we state that the Word was God and all the way back in the beginning and yet also alongside God, in proximity with God? Well, this is a rather confusing statement if you hold to any form of Unitarianism. But as Christians, we hold that this is telling us, giving us an insight into the nature of God. This is a proof text for the Trinity. The Trinity. The Trinity says that there only ever has been and only ever will be one Creator God. The Father is God. The Son is God, as we see right here. The Spirit is God. And yet there's a distinction between the Father and the Son and the Spirit and the Father. And we can note the two of those 3 points here. The Father is not the Son is not the Father, and yet both the Father and the Son are called God. Very significant and a good proof text for the Trinity. Verse 2 then continues to kind of further prove this point. It says, He was in the beginning with God. Now, it's interesting that we use he. That is a personal pronoun, and it is clearly filling in for the Word. So this word is not an idea. This word is not just a floating philosophical notion. This word is a person, is a he, a person. And later in verse 14, John will say that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, that this person existed eternally with God in the beginning, yet humbled himself and actually became a human. He was the only one who did this. This is a totally unique thing. No one else had ever done this, but Jesus did. He kind of combines the statements here. It says he was, there's our verb again. He was in the beginning. We have yet another preposition, with God. Okay. Now this is significant because it shows that where God was in the beginning, what God was doing in the beginning, there too was the Word. The Word was co-eternal with God and was God. Again, we get more fingerprints of Trinitarianism all over this verse. Verse 3 then says, all things. Now, all things is a very helpful statement. This is literally everything. Every single thing that you can think of. All things were made through him. This is another prepositional phrase. Through him indicates means. The Word was the means by which God created everything. Now, this is very interesting when you consider that in the Old Testament, it says that God alone created the heavens and the earth. He was the only one who did the work of creation. And yet right here, we see that this is done by means of the Word, of this personal he, the Word who was co-eternal with God. He was the means by which God created the universe, and yet God was the only sole creator, according to the Old Testament. How do we square these things? Well, the Trinity squares all of these statements in the Bible into one cohesive doctrine. In any case, all things were made through him, and then he goes on to further clarify the nature of all things. He wants to really make sure that we understand what all things is. That's not a great arrow, but there you go. All things, meaning without him was not anything made that was made. What does that mean? It's kind of confusing language. Well, it's saying that of the things that was made, so everything made, that is all of creation, anything that had ever been created was made through him. All of that was made through him. And if he didn't exist, without him, nothing would have been made. Apart from Christ, there would be zero things made. Now, this does not square with LDS teachings, that perhaps there are an infinite number of gods who rule over their own domains, have their own creation, and things like that. According to John 1, if there are created things, the Word created it. That just doesn't fit with LDS teaching, and it's important to note that John kind of makes the foundation of his entire gospel sit on these claims. Who is this Word? Well, John 1:14 once again says, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Who was it who became flesh and dwelt among us? Who was it that the Gospel of John records? Who was it that was the life and the light, as verses 4 and 5 in the first chapter we'll talk about? Well, Jesus. So when we consider all of these things, we find that the LDS teaching about Jesus is incompatible with this critical text about who Christ is. He's not just another one of the gods. He is the uncreated creator God. And how do we know that? Well, because of the statement in verse 3. This isn't just a God who exists. This is the God who created everything. This is the origin and source of everything that exists. And it was this Jesus, who was the creator of the earth, that he came to, that he humbled himself and went to, so that he could die for the sins of all those who would believe in him. So hopefully walking through this was helpful for you guys. I'd love to do more of these. If there are other texts you think would be helpful to walk through, please leave them below in the comments. Thanks for watching. As always, God bless.